The Osbournes were never just a rock family. They were a cultural phenomenon. From the moment their reality show exploded onto screens in the early 2000s, Sharon Osbourne, the indomitable matriarch, commanded attention with her wit, sharp tongue, and fearless devotion to her family. While Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, shocked, stumbled, and screamed his way through decades of music history, Sharon stood steady behind the scenes. His manager, protector, wife, and anchor. Their bond wasn't just romantic, it was foundational. Sharon shaped Ozzy's career with an iron will and unrelenting faith, guiding him through the turbulent waves of addiction, infamy, and health scares. They weren't perfect, but they were inseparable. The tragic turn. Ozzy's death and the immediate aftermath. The announcement of Ozzy Osbourne's death rocked the world. It wasn't unexpected. His battle with Parkinson's disease, spinal issues, and years of health decline had been documented and discussed, but the finality still struck like a thunderclap. For Sharon, it was the loss of more than a husband. It was the loss of a lifetime built on chaotic love and creative partnership. Insiders revealed that the moment the call came, the confirmation that Ozzy was gone, Sharon reportedly collapsed in their Buckinghamshire estate, unable to speak, frozen in shock. From that moment on, those close to her say Sharon began to slip. Initially surrounded by friends, staff, and family, she gradually began to withdraw. At first, it was subtle. Canceled appearances, missed phone calls, cryptic messages. But soon, the signs became more distressing. Sharon, once the most talkative voice in any room, had fallen nearly silent. According to a longtime friend, she would often sit in the garden for hours, staring blankly at the trees Ozzy once loved to walk beneath. A grief unlike any other grief is complicated, messy, nonlinear, and uniquely personal. But what friends and family observed in Sharon went beyond ordinary mourning. There were days she wouldn't eat, nights she'd wander the estate alone, clutching an old photograph of Ozzy. According to staff, she began lighting dozens of candles each night, sometimes reciting passages from books about the afterlife or talking softly to shadows. More alarming was the transformation of Ozzy's music studio, a sacred space filled with decades of history. Sharon reportedly spent hours inside, listening to his unreleased tracks on loop, sometimes crying, sometimes humming along. She insisted no one move a single item. His jackets remained draped over the back of his favorite chair. His last cup of tea still sat on the shelf. It wasn't just preservation. It was as if she was trying to pause time, to live in the moment before the loss. The garden burial controversy. What truly ignited public debate, however, was Sharon's reported wish to bury Ozzy in the garden of their home. A decision that left family members stunned and fans outraged. The request wasn't made casually. Just days after Ozzy's death, Sharon allegedly called for an emergency meeting with their legal and estate team. Most expected discussions around memorial services or financial planning. Instead, she dropped a bombshell. She wanted Ozzy buried under the old rose garden in their backyard. To Sharon, it wasn't morbid. It was sacred. That garden, shaded by a gnarled oak tree and blooming with wild English roses, was one of Ozzy's favorite places in his final years. He would sit for hours, sometimes with a book, sometimes just listening to the birds. Sharon reportedly said, "He built this home. He bled in this home. He'll rest in this home." Legal hurdles and family division. Under UK law, private burials are not impossible, but they require stringent permissions, proper documentation, and regulatory compliance. Burial on private land demands both environmental assessments and notification to local authorities. When Sharon was informed of these challenges, insiders say she became more determined, instructing her lawyers to do whatever it took to make it happen. Not everyone was on board. While Jack Osbourne supported his mother's emotional reasoning, stating it was something Ozzy had once considered himself, Kelly Osbourne was reportedly devastated. In one tearful confrontation, she allegedly pleaded, "Mom, this isn't normal. You can't just bury him next to the dog." The spot Sharon selected, beneath the rose garden, was also where their bulldog Lola had been laid to rest years before, a connection that both comforted and disturbed. A home-turned mausoleum. The Buckinghamshire estate has become more than a home. It's a living shrine to Ozzy Osbourne. Sharon's behavior within those walls has increasingly worried those around her. Staff say she refuses to leave. Every room is kept as it was. She walks the halls at night, sometimes calling out Ozzy's name. A close friend confessed, "She talks to him like he's still here." She sets out 2 cups of tea in the morning. She doesn't see that he's gone. Not really. There have been other signs. Sharon has reportedly begun studying spiritualism, mediums, and even ancient rituals regarding death and rebirth. Dozens of books on reincarnation and after-death communication have appeared in the home. Candles are lit at dawn and dusk. One family member called it a slow retreat into a different world, one where Ozzy never left. Strained family ties. The family dynamic has fractured under the strain. While Kelly has maintained a more sympathetic stance, believing her mother needs time and space to grieve, Jack and Amy Osbourne are said to be growing increasingly concerned. According to insiders, Jack has begun researching psychiatric grief specialists and is pushing for intervention. A heated phone call between Jack and Sharon reportedly ended with her screaming, "You don't get to tell me how to grieve." The two haven't spoken since. Amy, always more private, is allegedly seeking legal clarification on Ozzy's will, worried that Sharon might make irreversible decisions based on emotion rather than reason. Complicated grief or emotional collapse? Mental health experts consulted by those close to the Osbournes have begun suggesting that Sharon may be suffering from a condition known as complicated grief, an intense, prolonged, and life-altering form of mourning that blurs the line between memory and reality. In extreme cases, it can lead to depression, anxiety, hallucinations, or even psychosis. Friends say Sharon exhibits many of the signs: social withdrawal, obsessive rituals, denial of the loss, and difficulty performing daily tasks. One heartbreaking report mentioned that Sharon has started writing letters to Ozzy, leaving them beneath the tree where she hopes to bury him. Public silence and private suffering. To the outside world, Sharon Osbourne has remained largely silent. She has made few public appearances since Ozzy's death, and even those were fleeting, heavily managed, and devoid of her usual fire. In one photograph that surfaced online, she's seen in a wheelchair, head down, ignoring fans who approached with flowers and sympathy. "It was like she wasn't there," a witness said, but her silence has only fueled speculation. Online forums, tabloids, and even talk shows have debated whether Sharon is in mourning or mental collapse. The truth, as always, is likely more complex. Grief does strange things to the strongest of people. It distorts, disorients, and isolates. The future of the Osbourne legacy. As the dust begins to settle, one looming question remains. What will happen to the Osbourne legacy? With Ozzy gone and Sharon in crisis, the empire they built, from music to television to business, is hanging in limbo. Jack has reportedly taken over some of the estate's financial management. Kelly continues to speak publicly, trying to honor her father's memory. Amy remains quiet, but insiders suggest she may step up in coming months. As for Sharon, her future is uncertain. Those closest to her are urging professional help. They believe she's standing at a crossroads. Either she seeks support and begins the painful journey through healing, or she risks losing herself entirely to the grief she can't let go of. A final word: love that defied logic. Ozzy and Sharon Osbourne's love story wasn't just written in headlines or played out on television. It was carved into the jagged edges of rock and roll itself. Theirs was a partnership forged in chaos and kept alive through grit, loyalty, and a kind of love that refused to die, no matter how many times it was tested. Addiction, infidelity, fame, illness, and scandal came crashing into their lives like waves, relentless and unforgiving. But somehow, They stayed standing, side by side, wounded, but not broken, always returning to each other, always finding something worth saving in the ruins. To Sharon, Ozzy wasn't simply her husband. He was her entire atmosphere, the air she breathed, the storm she danced through, the music that scored every chapter of her life. From the backstage corridors to their quiet moments at home, his presence was constant, chaotic, and utterly irreplaceable. Their bond, messy and magnetic, defied logic. But love rarely plays by rules. It simply demands to be felt, no matter the cost. Now that love faces its greatest test, Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, is gone. And Sharon, fiercely private in the most personal moments despite a lifetime of public living, is left with a grief so consuming it doesn't know where to go. In the quiet aftermath, one choice has stirred the world's curiosity: her decision to bury Ozzy in the garden of their home. To outsiders, it may seem strange, macabre even. But to those who understand the depth of their connection, it might make perfect sense. Maybe it's not madness, but memory guiding her. Maybe the earth where they once laughed, argued, and loved is the only place that can hold the weight of her sorrow. Maybe burying him there is a final act of devotion, her way of keeping him close, grounding her grief where their life together took root. Love and loss are strange twins. Over time, the boundary between them blurs, and grief becomes a kind of love with nowhere to go. Sharon is navigating that blur now, stumbling through the dark in search of something solid. She's not grieving correctly or publicly. She's grieving honestly, as only someone who has lived and loved fiercely can. For years, the world was invited into the Osbournes' chaos, laughter, and raw humanity. Millions watched them fight and forgive, unravel and rebuild. Now that same world watches again, more quietly this time, hoping that Sharon finds peace in the silence left behind. No one can say what healing will look like for her. But one thing is certain: the love she shared with Ozzy was wild, flawed, and unforgettable. And in that garden, where he now rests, that love continues to bloom, imperfect, enduring, and utterly real.